we are live again.
All right, so we had some technical glitch. I hope everybody
Uh,
is back.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for this interruption. Toby, we are live again now.
Okay,
You can
perfect.
start. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Sorry about that technical difficulty we had. So I don't know where exactly I stopped, but so we talked about VAK, which is visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, which basically it's important to you because um, you have to know your audience, right? You have to know your team that you're working with and understand whether they are more visual people, whether they understand things when it is told to them, or are they the people who internalize things and learn from that. So it's important for you to understand, what kind of people you are communicating with, so that you can communicate to them in their preferred way of understanding. And that this is important with customers, it's important with your team members. So this is very important to understand. So I hope you got the main points from this particular slide. Let's take a deeper look into what these representational systems are, which is VAK. So visual is all about what is seen. Auditory is all about what is being said and what is being heard. And kinesthetic is all about what do they feel. So about 40% of communication happens through visual. So when you are sharing things with your team, when you're sharing things with your stakeholders, printed materials are important. Handouts are important. They're also looking at your body language and your facial expressions. About 20 to 30% of what people understand is what they hear. These are spoken words, these are sounds that they hear. So it's important to have actually face to face communication, or even a telephone communication, or Zoom, or whatever you're using. So think about who are the people who understand when you just send them an email, who are the people who understand better when something is spoken to them. And last is kinesthetic, which is about 30 to 40%. This is about emotions. This is where your emotional intelligence comes into play. This is where how they internalize the information. Uh, they they hear, they see, but they actually internalize more how they feel about something. Okay, so it's important to think about these things, because it's all about what do you see, what do you hear, and what do you feel inside. So the way human brain processes information is extremely complicated, right? Um, so according to Lu Chen, who's a neurobiologist at Stanford Medicine, um, so this doctor says that even after so many years of research, they still don't really understand the brain well enough. I mean, it is a very, very complicated, it's a very, very complicated, how do I say it? I said earlier that it's like a computer, right? So it is, if you think of your brain as a computer, the amount of information it has the capability to process is very complicated. And think about it, right? From the time you were born to the time you leave this world, it stores so much information in your brain. Remember, when it rains for the first time after a long time, the smell that comes from that, right? When that urdu mein bolte hain sondi sondi si khushbu. So your brain has a memory of that, right? You remember so many things from your childhood. You remember things that your boss said yesterday to you, some news things that you read. It has the ability to take pieces of information and store it and retrieve it as needed. So again, it's a very, very complex part of us. But the problem is that we still haven't really understood it well enough. Scientists are still learning so much about it. So let's talk about deletion, distortion, and generalization. So think about uh, information that is coming into your head, are you really taking all of that information? So deletion really is where a lot of the information that is coming in, you are just deleting it. You're not even listening to all of it. You're just omitting it because end of the day, you have only so much capability to take in. So you delete some of that information. The next is distortion, when you have a personal bias, that twists our perceptions. So for example, um, let's say that let's say that in a particular restaurant they always put more sugar in coffee or tea. So when you order your coffee, you're going to tell them, please give the sugar on the side. And that's because you have a presupposition in your mind that they're going to put more sugar in that. So it's our personal biases. And same thing about people, right? So we all know certain people who add a lot of masala to everything that they say to us, right? So our brain automatically kind of filters out some of the things that they're saying. Or when they say something, for example, they said, oh, I walked for 5 miles. Your brain says, okay, this guy must have walked for just 1 mile, right? So your brain distorts some of that information. And the last is generalization. This is where you may have had one or two experiences, and you just take that into consideration and say, okay, whenever Sam says anything to me, most of it is incorrect. So basically they are interrelated, but it's important to understand what is deletion, what is distortion, what is generalization. So basically the inputs that are coming into your brain, they get filtered through these three mechanisms. So this is a quick activity. We lost some time because of the technical glitch, so I'm not going to go too deep into this. And also in a webinar, it's slightly more difficult. But think about this in your mind, right? Try to identify what kind of filters you have in your brain. So, for example, I'm going to say a few sentences, and you, sorry, I'm going to say a few sentences and you fill in those words for that. Okay, so for example, I'm going to say, um, it's dash to do it this way. It is dash to do it this way. If you say this, or if you heard this a lot of times, what is the word that comes in dash? Think about it. Next one is, dash is something I can never do because dash. I'm going to say one more. Taxi drivers in Karachi are dash. Taxi drivers in Karachi are dash. Fill in that word for me. What's coming up in your mind? Please don't share it. So just think about the biases that play in your mind when these things happen. So an interesting thing is, like, a lot of times my wife and I would watch the same movie. Uh, we'll sit, we have the same screen, we are hearing the same dialogues, we are seeing the same subtitles, we are in the same room with the same amount of volume, but both of us have different reactions from the movie. A lot of times we will, after the movie, we'll ask, hey, how was the movie? And they'll say, it was like this, and I might say, oh, it was like this. So the same movie with the same sound, with the same dialogues, with the same actors, same story, it creates a different experience for each of us. And that's because our senses, our beliefs, our assumptions, the way we process information is different. So it's important to understand, what do you hear and what do you understand. So let's start bringing it closer to our Agile teams. So let's play a couple of these in our mind and think about, if you are working with your teams in your organization, with your Agile teams or with other stakeholders, if somebody tells to you, so think about those three filters: deletion, distortion, and generalization. So think about it in your mind, which one applies to some of these. Like, I'm not going to read all of them, but let's say somebody says, we always do it this way. We always do it this way. Is that deletion? Is it distortion? Is it generalization? Next, if somebody tells you, right, your team member comes and tells you everything is on track, everything is on track. Somebody tells you they never help. This particular department, they never help. And you've heard people say that, Jira sucks. Okay, Jira sucks. Like, what part of Jira sucks? I mean, Jira is, by Altation, it's one of the most popular, broadly used, you know, uh, life cycle management tool in the world. All of Jira can't suck. Like, what is it? And when you ask them questions, they will give you responses which will actually help you understand what part of it is a problem. If there's somebody says QA team is weak, so the reason I'm sharing this with you is you have to now think about, are they deleting information? Are they distorting information? Are they generalizing information? And this is what the most important part is. What kind of questions should you ask to understand deeper? If somebody comes and tells you everything is on track, then you ask them more questions to really go deeper. And especially if you know a certain group or a certain team is known to kind of put a positive spin on things, it's more important to understand from them, because it shouldn't go from everything is on track to nothing is ready, because sometimes that happens, right? And we want to avoid that. So think about, in these situations, what kind of questions would you ask in the Agile realm to understand better? Here's an interesting thing about reading eye accessing cues. Basically, um, this is a technique in NLP, and this is used by a lot of military and police. And if you watch some of the crime patrol kind of interrogation techniques, when people utilize, they use certain parts of uh, NLP in that. So let's understand what this means, right? So the first one is your visual construct, right? So if somebody is looking towards the left side, like over this way, so I'm going to take my glasses out. So if somebody, when you ask them a question and their eyeballs go this way, they're visually reconstructing something. A lot of times it could be lying. It doesn't have to be lying, but they are reconstructing something in their head. So they're looking, when you ask them something or when they're speaking, their eyeballs are towards the left. Um, when their eyeballs are towards the right hand side, they are like this way. They are looking, or they're going into their memories to recall something that they have seen. So if I ask somebody, hey, have you ever seen an orange colored rose? So it goes into their memory. They dig into their database and they're trying to recall an image from that. So if somebody is looking on towards this side up, that's what it means. Let's think about auditory now, right? So the first one is more visual on the VAC side, on the V of the VAC. So when somebody is trying to think to themselves whether the sound of that is correct, their eyes are towards the left, towards the center. And if they're remembering the sound, right? So if I tell somebody, hey, have you ever heard an electric guitar? and their mind goes into their sound database and is trying to pull some information, and when they're trying to remember the sound. um, Now about feelings. So this is where they're looking down towards the left hand side, and when they're actually talking to themselves first. So if I ask a question, for example, hey, if I give you um, 50 lakh rupees, what would you do with it? Would you quit your job? So they might, they're sitting like this, but their eyes are kind of towards this side, and they're having an internal discussion with themselves. So you can see that they're talking to themselves inside and coming up with a response. And if they're looking straight ahead at you, if they're looking straight ahead at you, then it basically means that they're visualizing things while they're talking to you. So these things could mean different things to different people. Okay, so this is very important, and if you are interested, you can look it up on YouTube. There are a lot of videos about how this is utilized. This can be used when you're talking to your team members. This can be utilized when you're interviewing people. There is a link here in the bottom, so when I share the slides, you might be able to just pull that up and look into that as well. Very, very interesting. And police and military, they use a lot of these things. Now that you've learned this, watch in TV interviews or other conversations how a person's eyeball is moving while they're having communication, while they're communicating or when they're conversing. A lot of times you'll see, you ask something to a in a celebrity, they ask them something, and their eyes go like this, and they're like, yeah, that last time when I did this, this is what was happening, and they're recalling that information. So it's very, very interesting. So please do look at that. So let's jump into Agile Teams. I know we are close to time. So Agile and communication teams. So we learned about what is NLP. We learned the history. We learned about how we process information in our head. Now let's bring it to the real world, where in our work as agilists, how can we utilize some of these, right? So think about how can we utilize what you have learned in communicating better, in creating rapport with the people. So let's say that you are you're talking to a stakeholder, and you're trying to sell some services or products to them. If you understand whether they are a visual or auditory or a kinesthetic person, and you are able to present to them in their best way of learning, excuse me, how better the communication will be, right? Think about the behavioral flexibility that you're going to get from understanding how best to work with your teams. So a lot of these things can be applied to Agile Teams. So let's look at the Agile Manifesto and see how this fits in, right? So the manifesto says individuals and interactions over processes and tools. How does NLP come in here? So NLP comes in here because it helps you to collaborate better, it helps you to communicate better, and communication is a two-way street, right? So when you are speaking clearly, when you are speaking with the intent of communicating and not talking, they are able to understand better. That improves your interactions. Next is working software over comprehensive documentation. So it improves throughput and productivity. NLP improves that because you are reducing the distortion, you're reducing the generalization, you are reducing that deletion, and your teams are able to understand better. Therefore, they are able to produce better, right? Communication is everything. And then customer collaboration, obviously, like I said earlier, if you're able to understand your customers better, how they take in information, you will be able to communicate with them better, and that helps with that. And last but not least, it helps your leaders to undergo personal transformation to lead change, right? So emotional intelligence, the way, if they understand how they speak, how much of that is actually being understood by other people. Your leaders and you as leaders will be able to go through the transformation yourself and help others. So let's look into an example. So I'm going to be, so this is, excuse me. So this is a short play that I'm going to kind of read out here. So please think through that this is happening in a real life. Um, if this was uh, if this was in person, we would have done this as an activity. But given that this is COVID-19 and this is virtual, I'm just going to kind of play this out. Okay. So please don't read the script. That's the only way I can actually see the screen. So I'm going to move to the next here. So please just listen to the words. In fact, it's even better if you don't mind closing your eyes and listen to this conversation that's about to happen. Um, so basically, I'm going to play the role of two people. One is a team member, and one is a scrum master. Okay, so I'm going to play this role, and if you guys can keep your eyes closed and just listen and internalize, and I'm going to ask a few questions in the end. Team member, we have a huge problem. We will not be able to demo the feature tomorrow to our stakeholders. Scrum Master. Hmm. In the stand up this morning, I heard that everything is on track. What is stopping you from demoing it tomorrow? Team member. The feature will not be ready. Scrum Master. Can you please elaborate? What remains to be done? Team member. Good question. Code is developed, it is unit tested, it has been peer reviewed. Also, the integration testing has taken place, but we cannot deploy it to the demo environment. Scrum Master. Hmm. So the only issue is with deploying? Team member. Yes, it is always like this with the DevOps guys. Scrum Master. Always? Team member. Well, not always, but last two sprints. Scrum Master. Hmm. What changed in the last two sprints? Team member. Martha, she went on maternity leave and they are so short-handed. Scrum Master. Okay. Did you tell the DevOps team and the lead in advance? Team member. No, we did not. Scrum Master. Okay, so what should we do now? So you guys can come back. So what happened in this scenario? And is this a common scenario that happens? It is, right? Uh, Somebody says something to you, but they themselves are not giving you the whole picture. And if the Scrum Master wasn't smart and did not ask the right questions, uh, the Scrum Master would have just taken in what the team member said, which basically is that they are not able to demo tomorrow. So basically, the stakeholders are coming to the demo. It has been scheduled. Typically, it's a big activity. It's very important for Agile teams. But if the Scrum Master just took the first sentence at its face value without asking questions, that could have had really bad impact, right? But because the Scrum Master asked more questions to understand deeper, he or she was able to understand that, okay, the person, when the team member, when they said that the feature will not be ready, they really meant that it cannot be deployed. It is ready because development has taken place, unit testing has happened, peer reviews happen, integration, everything has happened. Just the deployment part is the problem. So this was a distortion here where they distorted the facts. And then there was a generalization where they said it's always like this with the DevOps people. And the Scrum Master says always, and they says, well, not always, last two sprints. So, something was lost in that, they should have known that somebody's on maternity leave. They should have communicated earlier. But the fact here is that the information that was provided was inadequate, and the Scrum Master was able to resolve that, right? So keep this in mind, right? How NLP techniques can help you. So let's talk about what are some of the ways in which NLP can be used in Agile teams. So the first one is, you can build better relationships, right? By understanding people, by improving your interpersonal skills and developing that rapport between you and your team members and the stakeholders, your relationships can get better. And then better clarity. Now that you know how, these things take place, how communication gets filtered, you should be able to now make some changes in your communication style so that you are speaking more clearly. You are not just talking, but communicating. And then the idea is to make sure that there is a deep understanding of what is being said. By practicing some of these things, by using NLP when you are recruiting, basically in your interviews, for example, those eye movements, a lot of those things, you can understand the candidate better. And once you bring those people on board, how through communications you can develop them and become a high performing team. And then your own transformation, right? If you noticed today during the session, a lot of times I asked you question about, what are your biases, how do you process this information. So it helps you to understand yourself so that you can understand how you come across to people, and you can start utilizing some of the benefits that emotional intelligence that I'm sure all of you have heard and read about, how you can bring that, your self awareness, into your team, and utilize that to build better relationships, right? So that's where your personal transformation will happen. And once you are transformed, then you can bring the what you went through, help other people, develop other people as well, right? And last but not least, your your outcomes, no, not outputs, your outcomes will become better because your communication becomes better, your relationships become better, your teams become high performing. So in summation, or as an outcome of that, the organization or your team's outcomes will definitely get better. Okay, so here are some of the benefits that you could get: stronger relationship, improved team performance, better engagement, increased confidence. So these are some of the benefits that you can start getting out of it by starting to use NLP. So please do look up, read more about it. Here are 3 recommendations that I have if you want to learn more. If you are into coaching, Vikram Dhar is my guru. I learned NLP from him. This is a good book for all of like coaching. Um, this on the left hand side, Kate Burton's book, Coaching with NLP for Dummies. This is much easier to understand. It's really, as the book says, it's dummied down for everybody to understand. And if you want to get a wide and deep understanding of this, this is written by Steve Andreas, one of the leaders and one of the first ever gurus of NLP. So you can learn from that as well. With that, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming. So these are my gurus from who I have learned. And I don't know if we have time for questions, so I will turn it back to the organizers. Thank you so much for being part of today's session. Sorry, it took a little longer. I think I compensated for the break.
Thank you so much, Toby. Unfortunately, we have been witnessing some sort of technical glitches today, which kind of distorted some the conversation. I think it was one of the best sessions we had in terms of information, in terms of knowledge, in terms of learnings. Um, Purely, I would say subject-based training, learning for all of us who are listening. Thank you so much for taking out time from your precious schedule and talking to us, talking to the audience. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Like we are 10 minutes, beyond the time, so we won't be able to take questions. But what we are going to do is all the questions we are going to email you, or we share through WhatsApp, so you can answer them, or you can just make a video of all those questions and send us to us. Send that video to us, and we will display
Okay,
that on our social media.
that sounds good.
So over to Nomanza. I think he's back.
Uh,
Thank you, Nomanza, for a wonderful session, and I hope you can
so,
do this
yes,
now.
yes.
I think we are again facing some technical glitch
Session
due to.
and a wonderful insight. I mean, for me, it was a new thing that I have learned, and I will be looking into this thing as I am working at Scrum Master and Manager level. So I hope that other participants in this session have also learned a few of the tips. I mean, one of the things that I have also learned is that to add certain details to what we communicate in order to have what we really meant.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So thank you, Toby. I think we'll be, leaving the session here.
Yep. Thank you
And
so much.
once again, we are truly grateful for your time, for your energy, for your patience throughout the session. We loved it, and we have a feeling that our audience loved it too. So take care of yourself, and that's all from
Thank you so
our
much.
side.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Take care. Bye bye. Thank you, audience, for having us for the session today, and we look forward to exciting sessions, bringing new sessions to you. Looking forward to see you again next Sunday, or maybe alternative Sunday. Thank you. Take care. Bye.